Hi, Beth. Can you hear me?
I sure can.
Okay, great. We're 1 minute out. Let's see. Can you see my screen, Beth?
Yeah, I can. Proposed home key project at Cedar and San Pablo.
Okay. Okay, great. And it looks like it's 5:30. We're still waiting for Paul and Margot, but I'm going to give some introductory remarks. So they'll have
You might as well
let
let
everyone
people
get in.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm admitting all now.
Okay. 20 so far.
Welcome, everyone. This is Councilmember Rashi Kesarwani for District 1, and we are just about to get started. Please remember to keep yourself muted. Ooh. So it's 5:31. So I will go ahead and get started. First, thank you to everyone who's joining us. And I want to just first clarify how this meeting came about. We did have a community meeting with Bay Area Community Services, or BACS, the operator of this proposed permanent supportive housing project, as well as the developer. And that meeting took place last Thursday, where we had more than 50 people attend, and we had a lot of discussion, and we got a lot of questions answered. And then some immediate neighbors who live very close to this site wanted an opportunity to talk to me about it. And we know that this Zoom link has been circulated very broadly. And so that's totally great. You know, we're happy to have as many people join us as possible. And we are going to try to answer as many questions as we can and have a discussion about this. I'm going to start with a very brief presentation, and no more than 10 minutes, hopefully less than that. And I want to acknowledge that I'm joined tonight by Deputy City Manager Paul Budenhagen, as well as Margot Ernst, who is our Manager of Housing and Community Services. They are here to answer any questions that may be better answered by our city staff, who have been working behind the scenes on this. So with that, let me just advance my slides. So this is our agenda. And so we want to leave as much time as possible for Q&A. And please know that this is just our first meeting, and I'm happy to have more meetings. I'm happy to meet in person and continue this conversation. So with that, I want to first talk about what is Project Home Key. This is a state program with a goal of housing people who are homeless or at risk of homelessness. It started with the Project Room Key model that some of you may be familiar with, which was a temporary solution during the depths of the pandemic to try to get people who are at high risk of developing serious complications from COVID-19 out of the unsheltered environment and into a room where they could be safe from the COVID-19 virus. And now Home Key is an opportunity for local jurisdictions like Berkeley to try to take some of these hotels and motels that have been used during the Project Room Key program and turn them into permanent supportive housing through the Project Home Key model. And this model has $1.45 billion of state and federal money that is available to local jurisdictions on a competitive basis. So the idea is that cities can apply for this grant funding to turn a hotel into a Project Home Key permanent supportive housing facility. So I want to answer one question I've heard, which is, why is this coming to us now? And there's a council item that is on our agenda for tomorrow at 4 p.m., a special meeting. And to answer sort of how we got to this point where we have this item on the council agenda, back in June of this year, the city council approved the issuance of a home key RFP to see if there were any developers in our area who were interested in pursuing this model and applying for the state funds. In September of this year, the State Housing and Community Development Department released the notice of the funding availability of this 1.45 billion of home key funds that I mentioned. Then in October, the city issued an RFP, and we received a response from one developer who is the developer that is pursuing this redevelopment of the Golden Bear Hotel into this permanent supportive housing project. And the action tomorrow night that the council will consider is whether we want to submit the application to the state to see if we are going to receive the home key funds to be able to pursue this project.
Yes, Rashi, can I ask, how much is it to acquire that property?
Sure, I will just briefly mention the finances now, and we can talk at length about it because I do want to get through the whole presentation. But basically, there is a $5 million local general fund commitment. There is some American Rescue Plan dollars that are also proposed to be used, about 2.3 million. And with those funds that the city of Berkeley has available, the grant application requests roughly 16 million from the state. And the state 1.45 billion is a combination of state funds as well as federal funding.
So that's about $23.3 million in total.
Correct.
To acquire that property. And then subsequent to the acquisition, there would be this longer term funding that would be necessary, as whatever rent is going to be assessed, I imagine, would not be sufficient. Is that correct?
So some of the funds that I mentioned within that 5 million plus the 2.3, the 7.3 million, that I believe that incorporates some of those operating subsidies to subsidize the tenant's rent. And there's to make it even more complicated, the county will also be supporting the operational subsidy that's required.
So in your mind, at no point is there going to be future assessments, either directly or indirectly, on those of us who are property owners and already paying a lot of property tax?
So one thing, I mean, definitely this is a large sum of money. You know, there's no denying that. The 5 million in local funds, I do want to just give you a little bit more background. That comes from something that voters approved in 2019 called Measure P. And that was an increase in the transfer tax on the top third of residential or commercial properties that are sold. So if you sold a property recently, you are somebody who enabled us to have that $5 million. Tom, thank you for those questions. I know those are important. Let me just, I just have 2 more slides. So let me just wrap up and then we can do lots of Q&A. So, okay, so public input. So I know this is a frustration that we haven't had a lot of public input, but I do just want to note what has happened. We had our Housing Advisory Commission and our Homeless Services Panel of Experts weigh in on whether Berkeley should pursue a home key project just in general. That we didn't have the specific site and the specific details of this project for those two commissions to consider. But they did weigh in that, yes, Berkeley should pursue a home key project if one was feasible. We also had the meeting I mentioned last Thursday, and we're having our meeting tonight. And then we're going to have our council item tomorrow night. So I just want to acknowledge that I wish there would have been a lot more public input prior to the council item tomorrow night. I will say even I did not know about this until the end of November. Like November 30th is when I was first alerted to this, and I didn't even know at that time that there would be a special meeting tomorrow. So I didn't find out about that until later. But my commitment is that we will answer every question you have, and that we will, I'm very open to having more meetings, as I said, in person, on Zoom, with backs, without backs, with our city staff. We will do all of that. And then finally, this is my last slide. I just want, for those of you who weren't able to attend the meeting last Thursday, let me just give you some, let's see, we have 5 bullets here on what the proposal is for this site. So there are 45 rooms at this hotel. So 44 of them will become studio apartments. 1 unit will be reserved for an on-site manager. The units will include an efficiency kitchen. So that includes a sink, small refrigerator, and space to support what will be a small induction cooktop. There will be on-site services and supports, including on-site residential counselors and care coordinators providing mental health services, linkages to benefit support, employment, and other resources as needed. And there will be, in addition to the efficiency kitchen in each unit, there will be a larger shared community kitchen that will be available to all residents. In terms of safety and security, there will be site-based staff trained in mental health first aid, de-escalation, crisis intervention and medication, and other supports working on site throughout the week to support and oversee safety on the property. The project has also budgeted for standard security, and the scope of that will be determined after occupancy. There will be tenant screening, first by the Alameda County Healthcare Services Agency for eligibility based on a person's background, and then also by the operator BACS at application acceptance, when they will conduct a comprehensive screening and needs assessment. So that's that. And then finally, there will be insurance, and the property will have full replacement and liability insurance coverage. So with that, I want to turn it over to our deputy city manager, as well as our manager for housing and community services, to see if they have any opening remarks to add. And then we will open it up to questions. And please, I see people are already in the chat, use the chat to ask your questions. My aide Beth is monitoring, and I am also going to take a look, and we will answer as many questions as we can. So Mr. Budenhagen or Ms. Ernst,
thank you,
please go ahead.
Sorry. Thank you, Council Member Kesarwani, for bringing us together. And it's nice to be here with everybody tonight to talk about this project. And we're happy to answer any questions that we can. I think you really did a very thoughtful job about summarizing the project in a few short slides, as well as the process and the timeline. I'm getting a little echo. So yeah, I think part of the issue is the process is quick. So the city's RFP closed November 1st, and as you mentioned, we only received the 1 application, so staff had to take a little while to review that application, to see if it was complete, et cetera. So it was sort of like the end of the first week of November. And then you kind of outlined already the timeline for the submission of the submission to the state. And then we will wait to see what the state says. Should council say, yes, go ahead and submit that application. So I don't actually have a whole lot to add to what you said. I don't know. We have Margot Ernst, who's the new, she's only been here a month, so, or 3 weeks, I don't know exactly. So she's not, necessarily fully up to speed on all this stuff because she's just still new here, who's the Housing Community Services Manager in HHCS. HHCS is the Health, Housing, and Community Services Department. So, and within that department, the division that manages these programs is called Housing Community Services. So, I don't know, Margaret, if you want to introduce yourself, and if there's anything you want to add, please do.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. So yeah, I'm Margot Ernst. I'm the new manager of Housing and Community Services, and I'll just echo what Paul said. I'm also really happy to be here with you all, happy to answer questions as best I can. And also, Councilmember Kesarwani, I thought you did a great job giving an overview. I don't really have anything to add at this time until we have specific questions to address.
Thank you so much to both of you. I am looking at the chat. I see some comments. One question was if we had more detail on the screening criteria. I believe this is about when the tenants are selected for the site. And I believe we have somebody from BAX, Ms. Daly, who is also a District 1 resident, Nora. I don't know if she is listening, if she is able to give us more background on the screening criteria.
Hi, can you hear me? This is Nora.
Yes, we can hear you.
Hi, wonderful. So the screening criteria is typically a little bit specified site by site based on different neighborhood needs, and that can include specific district needs, city ordinances, but we are typically screening for criminal justice backgrounds, like involvement with criminal justice organizations, for their past history of homelessness. We also do a lot of screening around what kind of tenant someone is and can be with our support, and what kind of supports they'll need to get there, so that we make sure that we're creating a really cohesive community. We also do small site housing where there's only 4 or 5 people living in a place. And so it's very important for us to be screening for people who can live harmoniously together, while still making sure that we're not providing barriers to prevent people from exiting homelessness.
Thank you so much, Nora, for that. We had another question about how many staff will be on site 24/7. I know I mentioned the on-site manager. My understanding is that individual will be on site 24/7. Nora, do you have anything further on that? I understand there are going to be 2 other staff who are available, but my understanding is those folks are not 24/7.
Yeah, those staff members would not be on site 24/7, but we do have a lot of staff members who will be coming and going. So while there won't be 1 to 2 people beyond the manager who are there constantly, you're gonna experience, there will be a lot of back staff who are, low impact way to the neighborhood, coming in to make sure that they are providing support to both the site and the clients.
Thank you very much, Nora. And I just want to say, somebody asked in the chat if they have a long question, if they can raise their hand. And absolutely, you can raise your hand. And I'll try to go back and forth between hands and the chat. Right now we have 1 person with their hand raised, David Miller. Do you want to share your question or comment?
Sure. So I was at the meeting last week, and I thought for the most part it went pretty well. Just to sort of summarize my family's position, we're you're in favor of this project, if there were an empty structure next to the hotel that, looked just like the hotel, but wasn't a thriving business, we would love to have it there. The one thing about this property that hasn't been acknowledged, which has been kind of surprising, is that the hotel is a thriving part of our community. It's not like some wealthy hotelier that has their property in the middle of Berkeley and, someone from far away is profiting off of Berkeley residents. It's a community resource. It seems to be packed and busy the vast majority of the time. We live right across the street at Jones and see the parking lot every morning when we walk the dog. And we love having this safe place so close that our family can stay when they visit. The hotel is not some underutilized piece of land that provides no community benefit. And I feel like in discussions around that, that is what it's treated like. It sounds like it's being referred to as an empty building, So it's a significant loss. And if this passes, the city of Berkeley created this void, as far as we're concerned. And I totally respect that state budget was made available. Golden Bear saw a number that was impossible to ignore. We don't know anything. Nobody knows anything about the reason for selling. It does not pass the smell test that this hotel just renovated became a very nice place that's being used all the time. Yet this is the one property that a proposal gets submitted for. It doesn't make sense. I heard what you said, council member, last week when you said that if this doesn't move forward, the money goes to a different city. But I don't understand why that should be on this neighborhood that BACS didn't pick a better location. I feel like there had to have, with all the buildings in Berkeley, with all the hotels in Berkeley, there's even a hotel just down the block that isn't as nice, isn't used as much. We walk by it all the time. I think it's called the Berkeley Inn. Taking away this hotel subtracts from the community. I have two other things to say, but that's sort of the main way that we feel about this. We don't understand why this place that our family could stay. Now our family is going to stay at a hotel on University, which we, aren't as comfortable.
Thank you, David. Of course, unfortunately, we don't have somebody, representing the hotel's perspective, to give us insight into why they are agreeing to this potential purchase in the event that we are successful in getting the state home key funds. So I just want to acknowledge that I totally hear you on that and appreciate that it's a sentiment shared by other folks. I want to jump back to the chat. Joyce made a comment that I think I have heard from other folks, so I just want to highlight it. She's saying that the neighborhood has had the Jones building. We know that the workforce housing for the school district is proposed at the adult school, and now this. She's saying it's too much for our neighborhood. There must be other sites to consider. Again, I can't speak to why this hotel operator chose to pursue this opportunity with the developer. But I do just want to acknowledge, yes, there has been a lot of development in this general area at, these 3 projects now that are either already built or proposed. And as a representative of all of District 1, it is true that District 1 and District 2 to some extent, we do have a disproportionate share of homeless services and homeless housing compared to other parts of the city. And Tom and I had an important back and forth at the last meeting that other parts of Berkeley do need to do their fair share. And what is happening right now is in the city of Berkeley is something called the housing element process. It's a once in 8-year process to basically consider rezoning the entire city. It's basically a master plan for where we should have development citywide. And I spoke at our work session last Thursday about the housing element process that we need to make sure that we are serious about something called affirmatively furthering fair housing. It's a mouthful, but you know, the concept was first established in 1965 with the Fair Housing Act, the federal law. And the idea is that we should actually put more of our lower income housing, our affordable housing, in higher income neighborhoods, because that creates an opportunity, a greater opportunity for those lower income folks. And we know that we have high income neighborhoods, higher, I don't want to say that, you know, Berkeley is changing, right? But we have higher income neighborhoods that have not had the proposals that we have, you know, within these few blocks. So I just want to acknowledge that that is true. And the housing element process is going to be our opportunity to affirmatively further fair housing and see that we have a more equitable distribution of these projects across the city. And we do have commercial corridors on Solano Avenue and College Avenue, for instance, that I think have a lot of potential to see more of this kind of development. So let me jump back to hands raised. Let's see, we have Cece. Go ahead.
Hi. Yeah, thank you. So I live 1 block away and I represent, there are several of us families on this block. We all have young kids, elementary age and younger. This is kind of a hard meeting time. So I said I would hop on and just sort of share our collective thought. In general, we support the project. I think that there is a bit of a feeling of just, we have lived with encampments and close proximity to the RVs and so much in our area for a long time. I have had people in mental health crisis walk down our street and, you know, like say they were going to kill my children while we're standing outside our house. Like, we have had some really negative experiences. I'm excited about the project and the idea that there are mental health services and supports and all of that. I feel like for us to feel like we're kind of fully in on this, you know, we have 2 asks, and one is that we have a phone number we can call when there is somebody in crisis, or maybe somebody, you know, whatever maybe they have a need and they're out in the neighborhood and we see it, that we have a contact, and it's not just like a leave an email, we'll get back to you in a few days, but someone we can call who can like assist in that moment. And the other ask is that there can be a set number of rooms in this project dedicated to people who have been homeless in our neighborhood. Can we take the woman who's living outside of Office Depot and offer her the first slot? You know, some of the people that have been living in our neighborhood in close proximity to our neighborhood for a long time, can they get priority on some of these rooms so that it's not we're shifting more people experiencing homelessness into our neighborhood, but that we're housing some of those people who have been in our neighborhood already in this new project. So that's kind of our big request.
Thank you, Cece, for coming during this difficult time for parents. I want to acknowledge that. So on the phone number, I absolutely agree that I want our neighbors to have a phone number to call. I know we have the on-site manager, and I know we have Nora, and I just saw Jonathan Russell of BACS also join. Are you folks, is BACS able to provide neighbors a phone number to call if there is an issue?
Hey, Rashi. Yes, definitely. We were going to plan to have, as we said in the last meeting, not an email, but I mean an email too, but also a phone number for the staff that are working on site that can be called to receive support for an issue. So that definitely will be a part of the process, and that'll be an open and accessible number and line for people to reach out for situations like this and others.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. I really appreciate that. And the other point Cece made that I want to comment on is I totally agree. We have chronically homeless people just a few blocks from this proposed site on Harrison Street in the Gilman district. You know, I know you're mentioning this woman near Home Depot or Office Depot, I think, on 2nd Street, you know, and so yes, absolutely. I support that. I've been talking to our deputy city manager about that. Where we are right now is that these projects are required to use something called the coordinated entry system. And basically what this means is that this is a countywide prioritization system, but what I've been told is that we will be prioritizing North Alameda County, which includes Berkeley and Albany and Emeryville. I'm pushing for the prioritization to be just Berkeley. We have to see if that is allowable, but that's what I would prefer, that it would be Berkeley priority. And then in terms of people from this neighborhood, to the extent that we have more chronically homeless people in District 1, they would then inherently get priority as a result of their needs, because a coordinated entry system is about prioritizing people based on need. The other thing that my office is doing is trying to make sure that everybody who is unhoused in our district is in the coordinated entry system. They have to undergo an assessment. So right now I'm in the process of determining, how we can ensure that everybody has been assessed so that they'll get consideration for this. Mr. Budenhagen, do you have anything further to add on that point?
Yeah, you've really covered it. I don't really have much else to add, other than that we do have staff who, both contracted and city staff, whose job it is to go out and assess people for the coordinated entry system. And so that is one thing we do control, and we can focus energy on the the neighborhood to make sure that, as you're saying, council member, there is energy put towards making sure that those folks are assessed and on that list. Where exactly they fall, we don't have that control over, but we do have control over, talking to people, assessing them if they're willing to do it, going back and the next day if they're not, and working in that way to get more people on that access list.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Budenhagen. I'm scrolling through the chat. I just want to acknowledge there are a number of folks who are sharing the perspective that we need to have more of these lower income projects in higher income neighborhoods. And I just want to say that I share that belief. I think we absolutely need to see that. And that is what I spoke out in favor of at our work session last Thursday, as it relates to the housing element. That's going to be our best opportunity to zone more of the higher income neighborhoods for this type of housing, because in a lot of cases, the zoning right now in those areas doesn't allow for it as easily. So we need to change the zoning first, and then I think on the natural, we'll start to see more of these projects get proposed in those areas. Somebody asked about the track record of the developer. Unfortunately, we don't have the developer representative on this call. So I don't want to speak for him. I don't know if the BACS folks can share any information that they have about the developer, who again is separate from BACS. BACS is the operator.
Yeah, I mean, I won't speak on, this is Jonathan from BACS. We will be the operator and then the co-developer with MPI Homes and BACS. So it's a partnership where we're doing so together. And I know that what I will say is we're certainly in partnership because MPI Homes has a long history of doing this work and doing it very well for decades now. And that is, that's certainly why we're partnering, and I'm very excited to do so. But I can only speak from Max's vantage point there in doing that work closely together on this project.
Okay, thank you so much, Jonathan. We have so many comments in the chat, so please bear with me. I'm gonna look at that some more, but let me call on Dietmar so we can do our back and forth. Go ahead, Dietmar, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, hi. Thank you, Rashi. So I would like to second what I believe David said earlier about the fact that the Golden Bear Inn is and has been a neighborhood serving use. And I can second the same thing, like with relatives visiting, many people have tight quarters and can't accommodate guests. And that's a need that, if anything, will increase. As you know, most of the development that is proposed up and down the avenues are very small apartments. And so this is a valid use and it's been contributing to the neighborhood. And there's always this discussion, oh, what are we going to do with the first floors of buildings nobody wants to open a business. Well, here we have a business that has been in operation, and maybe they are in a fairly tough spot right now after the renovations and then COVID hits, but they're kind of at a weak point where one would say, well, smart economic development would be to help them through the crisis to keep a long-term established business that's been good for the neighborhood afloat. And what might be happening here is, with all this state money sloshing around, if you throw enough money at somebody, they'll take the offer. But is this the best use of public funds? Because that money didn't grow on a tree in Sacramento. This is our sales tax, this is our property taxes and state taxes. So if you do the math on that, almost 24 million for 44 units, the cost per unit or the cost per square foot would be something between $1,500 and $2,000 a square foot. That's enormous. And so when I heard this number in the presentation last week, I thought, well, what is not disclosed here? There is something that doesn't seem quite right, and maybe Jonathan from Bucks can answer that. At that point, I read in a response from him, 16 million state plus 6 million from the city, and did the numbers on 22 million. That seems at more than twice of what I would think fair market value would be for something like that. If you look at the size of the property, the improvements, the assumed cap rate or something like that, what is with all this extra money? I think we need much clearer definition of which money goes where, how is this distributed. There was some discussion about potential future addition. It's one thing to ask the neighborhood to bring 44 formerly homeless people in their midst, because that's not a kind of as a directly community serving. It serves the community at large. I completely agree with this. I also agree with the high need for sheltering the homeless and doing this, the approach of housing first to get people a footing to get back into productive life. I think this is all great, but also you cannot sell it as the best thing since sliced bread for the immediate neighborhood, because you're scooping up homeless population from a much larger area, and you're concentrating them at one intersection, and that's where we all happen to live. And if you have the need for staff to do de-escalation, well, it's based on the idea that there needs to be de-escalation. There needs to be escalation to be de-escalated. So I expect there to be frictions and problems, and I think it's acceptable. I would accept that, but I would also want to have this clarity. What's really going on behind the scenes here? Is there just so much money thrown at it to essentially force what could be a viable business out of business, just to kind of focus on the one thing that's dangled right in front of you? And I think we need much more transparency, and also a reassurance that this is not a Trojan horse where half of the money gets spent to buy the 44 units and then start having these extra funds slushing around to quadruple it, and suddenly we're not talking about 44 units, but 150 or 200. This is something that needs to be disclosed and not a backroom deal.
Thank you, Dietmar, for your comments. I think that, well, you shared a lot of comments, but I think the key one that I want to give you more information about is the cost issue. So Ms. Ernst, can you just provide some more clarity? My understanding is it's the 16 million that will be used to purchase the property, and then the additional 7 million is for unit improvements as well as for operating. But can you provide more detail on that?
Yes, Councilmember Kesarwani, I will just second what you said. The purchase price is about 16 million, so it's a little closer to about 365,000 per unit. There are some renovation costs and then operating subsidy, and it'll take me a minute to pull up some of the financials to be able to give a better breakdown, and so I can jump back on in a minute with some more information.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, why don't we let you get that financial information together, and in the meantime,
Rashi,
yes.
I'm sorry. So at 16 million purchase price, The other 7.3 million would be improvements. That comes out at 162,000 per unit. That is a lot of money, particularly given that it's a studio. Okay, now I don't know what kind of, the kitchen was explained to be a small convection type arrangement. That shouldn't be 162,000. So I don't know what else we're doing in the units. But I want to make a point here, and I really appreciate Dietmar's comments and so forth. We could house so many more homeless people with this money. Okay, and my experience with this topic is how do we measure success? Okay, is it roofs over the head, or is it sort of projects that win awards? Okay, and I had the same issue out in Contra Costa, where there were swimming pools and computer rooms attached to this affordable housing, and very few roofs being put over the heads of homeless. So how do we do it in Berkeley? And do we have a measure for what that is? And I suspect you don't, okay? But we should, because that's how you allocate money. What's the goal? Is it to house as many homeless as we can in safe, surroundings, and having a lighter impact on the overall community in terms of property owners and so forth? Or are we going to win awards with, a marquee project here? I'm really disturbed by it. Not with the goal of providing shelter for homeless, but how we're using so much money for only 45 units.
Thank you, Tom. If I could ask folks to mute. Oh, let me go back to Ms. Ernst, because I think she's got some more financial information for us, and she has her hand raised. So let me do that, and then we can continue.
I actually don't have more information up, but I did want to add, I really do understand the sticker price shock. I agree it is a high amount per unit. It's kind of the circumstance we're in right now. When we build like a new affordable unit, it can cost up to $700,000 per unit in construction costs. So it's very expensive, even for constructing smaller units like the size that are here. So I do understand the sticker price shock though, and it's a cost that has elevated dramatically in the last 4 years, 5 years, and over the last decade for sure. The other thing I wanted to mention is that there is, I'm not sure if we have it on, I'm sure we have it on file. I don't have it, but we would be requiring an appraisal of the property. So there is some due diligence, around that required when we're using public funds. We would have an appraisal of the property, and we would be looking at that sale price and the reasonableness of it.
Thank you, Ms. Ernst. And I just want to echo that, yes, the cost to build permanent supportive housing from scratch is extremely high, as Ms. Ernst noted, upwards of 700,000 per unit. We have done that in Berkeley. We, if you all have driven or walked by the Berkeley Way project, that is an example of building permanent housing from scratch. And unfortunately, I don't have all of those financials in front of me, but that project, the number I have in my head is $93 million to do that project. Mr. Budenhagen, do you know do I have the number right, and how many units that created? Permanent supportive housing units? That one is a tough comparison because it also has shelter space.
Yeah, it has a 44-bed shelter in it, and then it has both homeless housing and affordable housing in it. I can pull up the exact numbers, but somewhere in the order of like 59 and 45 of each of those, as well as an on-site, the staff are on site there for the shelter also. So it's a little bit of a different configuration and thing, but the point is the same that you're making and that Margot made also, and that it is, we all have sticker shock, and it is really expensive, as is the sale of any property in Berkeley or Oakland.
Yeah, I mean, so I do want to acknowledge, yeah, this is not cheap, but the comparison is relative to to building these units from scratch, it is less. So if you take that 23 million total all-in cost divided by the 44 units, you're talking roughly 500,000 per unit. No, that's not cheap, but that is less expensive than acquiring a parcel and developing housing from scratch. And so
Right.
that is why the home key model is being pursued aggressively by the state with, you know, significant funding, right? 1.45 billion, because if I may, you know, I think there's a recognition that acquiring existing units and rehabbing them is more cost effective than trying to build units from scratch in terms of how quickly you can develop the units and just the cost per unit being less. It's not, but I don't want to, you know, in any way imply that it's cheap. And so the total cost, yeah, is roughly 500,000. But when we take that 5 million of local general fund from Measure P, as I said, the transfer tax for the top third of properties. So for those folks who bought or sold a home, those are the folks who in the top third, those are the folks who provided that 5 million. If you take that amount and divide it by the 44 units, then it's roughly 100,000 per unit. So there are different ways to look at it. But I do want to acknowledge it isn't cheap. And that's part of why we have the challenge of so many unsheltered homeless in the Bay Area and across the state,
Right.
because it is so expensive to do this. Oakland has pursued a number of home key projects. This is the second phase of home key. Oakland was awarded a handful of projects in phase 1, so they are pursuing this. San Francisco is pursuing it. Other cities around the Bay Area are pursuing this because the benefit to a city is we don't have to put in the 23 million ourselves, right? We are going to hopefully get 16 million from the state. So it's a 2-for-1 there in terms of being able to leverage our dollars further.
But Rashi, just a point here. When you do the math,
Why there are other
I'm
people
sorry.
with their hands
So
up?
Tom, let me let other folks, you and I can definitely have a one-on-one, but let me let some other folks
Okay.
get in. One thing somebody put in the chat, which I want to respond to, is there was a comment that I was talking like this was a done deal. So I want to say it's not a done deal. There is going to be a council vote tomorrow. And I just want to be really realistic with you all. In a city like Berkeley, the council is being asked to support a grant application for 100% permanent supportive housing. So even if I decided to abstain or not vote on this because there hasn't been a lot of public input, the reality is 5 of my council colleagues are going to say yes to this. So I am, having this meeting because I want to hear your input, and to the extent that we can get in some assurances about prioritizing people in Berkeley in this item tomorrow. We're still exploring that. I'm going to fight for that. And we are trying to do as much as we can to make sure your interests and your concerns are addressed, like the phone number, having that phone number. So I'm trying to do all of that. But I just want to acknowledge the reality of the council consideration tomorrow. And then, then what happens beyond that? We have to see if the state is going to fund this project, right? I don't know when exactly we will get that response. I don't know if Ms. Ernst or Mr. Budenhagen know when we would hear back from the state, but that is another point.
Looks like if Budenhagen finally picks up the phone.
Okay, I think we were unmuted there. Do we know the timeline to hear a response from the state?
I think we're expecting to hear in February or March whether the application has been approved. So they're receiving them on a rolling basis and kind of approving them on a rolling basis. So it'll take some time. We would submit it at the end of January. So, February, March is what we would be hoping to hear back.
Okay, so that is going to be, an important point in this process where we're going to learn if we receive the state funding, because if we don't have that funding, this project is not going to proceed. And honestly, I don't know how Home Key Phase 1 went, you know, how many cities submitted applications but did not get their project approved. You know, we can look into that more, so we have an understanding of how realistic this is. So I just want to make all those points about, you know, this issue of feeling like this feels like a done deal. I totally understand that. And I will say that, you know, as this homelessness crisis has gotten worse in California, and there's been so much concern about the lack of affordability of housing, what we've seen from the legislature is more streamlining, less environmental review, and less ability for local jurisdictions to deny projects. So I just want to acknowledge that the state law landscape is changing. And so for these home key projects, my understanding is that the state legislature has specifically said that the state funding does not require California Environmental Quality Act review or a federal environmental review. So that's sort of the environment in which this project is happening, that the state legislature is very concerned about this issue of homelessness, and they are putting in mechanisms for these projects to happen pretty quickly, and without the community input that I think we are used to having and prefer to have. Okay, that was a question in the chat. Let me go back to hands raised. Let me call on Lauren. Lauren Parsons, go ahead.
This is Dan Smuts, and I think I was in the queue prior.
Okay. Oh, okay. Oh, yes. I apologize. I'm not able. I wasn't able to keep track of who put their hand up first. So Dan, why don't we do you first, and then we'll go to Lauren. Go ahead, Dan.
Great. Yeah, well, thanks for convening this meeting on very short notice. And as I just noted in the chat, I'm hoping you will use your vote tomorrow to register that this project has been inadequately vetted and has a substantial amount of community opposition. So yes, my expectation is that you will vote no, even if it's a 5-1 vote. Secondarily, the change in the use of this property in the CW zone is a change of use. Can someone please explain to me what use you see as being permissible under the zoning rules of Berkeley in the CW zone? So that's the first question. And by my read, it will require at minimum a use permit and possibly a zoning change in order to change this. You are removing a property from a commercial purpose to a nonprofit group housing accommodation. So if someone can point out where in the CW code you find that this project is acceptable, I'd be really curious to know.
So Dan, I'm not an expert on the zoning code, but what I can tell you is, you know, we have the Jones across the street, right? That's a residential building. So
it's a mixed use building. It's a
yes.
mixed use building.
Yes, yes,
which
it
has
first
floor retail requirements.
Yes.
And there's a percentage use requirement.
Okay, well, I think that obviously this this use is allowable here, but you know, I can't speak to specifically what in the zoning code allows it, but you know, I'm taking note of your question, and you know, please do email me and we can get you the specific reasoning in the zoning code, you know, because we're going to need to ask our planning department about that. But you know, let me defer to Margot or Paul if either of you have that answer right now.
I could weigh in from the vantage point of the home key regulations. I don't know, Paul, if you had anything you wanted to say, but I can jump in.
Yeah, you can go ahead and jump in. I can speak after you.
Yeah, so from my understanding, the home key, the program regulations for home key, because these are specifically kind of converting hotels, that the legislature has said that it shall be allowed without a conditional use permit, and shall be permitted in the zone where the structure currently exists. And,
Yeah,
and
I was going to say something similar. We can pull that language out and share that.
yeah, I can drop the language into the chat.
Okay, so I'm unfamiliar with the specific state regulation, but let it be clear that it is overriding a current Berkeley zoning use. So that in and of itself should cause some concern.
Thank you, Dan. I'm going to try to go back to Lauren. Please go ahead and unmute yourself.
Am I unmuted now?
Yes, we can hear
Okay,
you.
I'm very sorry. Thank you, Rashi, for, I want to thank Beth for organizing the Zoom. She's been awesome. I've talked to her several times. I'm sorry, my face isn't there, but whatever. I wanted to thank Tom and Dietmar and David and Dan, who are so well-spoken. I wish I had the wherewithal to be able to speak like that, but you said a lot of things that I totally agree with. I'm very concerned about this project, and I'm just curious, Rashi, have you seen these rooms? I just am astounded that they think that they can put kitchenettes in these rooms. It's insane. They're going to be trashed, but that's another issue, and that's not why I'm bringing this up. I just hope we are able to have another meeting, maybe in person, where we can, speak more about this. I heard what you said. The council's going to vote for it. They're all going to vote yes, and that puts you in this position. So I don't know what the implications of all of our issues are. I mean, as a community, we live right by this corner motel, and I just don't know what that's, if anything we say is going to make any difference. That really concerns me. But anyway, thank you for doing this, and I hope we do something further.
Thank you, Lauren. I had not had an opportunity to visit the rooms. So I'm not aware of, exactly what they look like. I know that they are small. I think they're about 350 square feet.
I saw
so
all
they're
I saw
micro
all
units.
the rooms. I mean, there's a lot of single bed rooms. That's a teeny room. There's no way that's really amenable for putting a kitchenette in. It's insane. I can't believe they want to do that. If there were a place for a community kitchen, that would make sense. But cooking in each one of these rooms is potentially very problematic, in my opinion.
Okay, thank you, Lauren. I appreciate that. We heard that comment last Thursday also. What I can share with you is that these are induction cooktops as opposed to gas, and they are going to, of course, be compliant with the fire and building code. So that is going to be there, and then the property will also have insurance. So obviously, I expect them to be designed safely and not to be any kind of fire risk. And in terms of hearing your concerns and questions, that is part of why, we held this meeting today. I do want to say, and there are a lot of comments in the chat that this public input doesn't feel sufficient. And I agree with you. We haven't had a lengthy input period the way that we have for other city processes. And I understand that frustration, and I wish it was different.
The chat. Can you share the chat with the other council people? Can you save the chat and share it with the other people on the council?
I think it is being saved, and I can do that. I think we can pull up the messages and share. And let me just say, I'll put it into the chat that you all can email. You are welcome to email the council.
Don't we get to share at the council?
What was the question?
Don't we get to share at the council?
Yes, you can come to the meeting tomorrow, and you can give public comment for this item. It's item number 3 at the special meeting at 4 o'clock. And if you have any trouble finding the link, email my office. I'm going to put my email in the chat again. We can make sure you know how to log into the meeting, because it will be like this. It'll be on Zoom, and there will be public comment taken for this item on the agenda. Okay.
Could I say something? I've been waiting for a long time.
Yes, I'm so sorry. I want to
But
get
I
to
think
everyone
there's
with their
other
hand raised.
people who have been waiting too.
I know. Well,
Okay.
There's an order.
So let's do Jay Martin and then Meryl Siegel.
thank you.
I have
Thanks so
nothing
much.
to say. I have nothing to say, but I see
Oh, okay.
Amy's hand. I see Amy's hand for a long time. That's
Yeah.
all.
I'm Jay Martin.
Oh, okay.
I appreciate I'll be brief.
Okay.
I work with housing developers and including Bridge, and I'm really concerned there's something not quite right here. I'd love to know what other sites the city's contemplating, because Bridge, we don't necessarily pick sites like this because of the density. This is a very low density project versus the amount for the land. And we tend to go at least 2 to 3 stories. And so I think other people like Dan and Dieter have made that comment, which I think is very astute. I'm concerned because of the use here. I live in the neighborhood. Sports teams use it. I saw the University of Oregon here just piling out of so a lot of them come for events and sports games. I know it's used all the time. And I think that's a really valid point. So I'm curious why this is being selected as opposed to other places in the city. And that hasn't been addressed neither in the council report and certainly not tonight. And I haven't heard it at the other meetings I've been to. I'm concerned that the operating costs ongoing, and I think this is something the public should know and the city should be aware of, if this developer or operator goes out of business, who's going to pick up the slack of it? Because the funds are only dedicated for the construction and purchase of the land, not the ongoing operational costs. And so that's another concern. And I'm worried, living in the neighborhood, once that operator, maybe the developer may be great and the operator may be great for the first year or two, it may get sold. I don't know what provisions there are in this to be transferred, but it could go to an operator that doesn't work out really well. We've had projects at Bridge do the same thing, and we've had a disaster. And they've impacted the communities in ways that we intend them to work out well, and then it doesn't. And so I think that's what you're hearing, council member, is there is concern that we're not looking with the broadest view and the long-term view here. And then I guess living in District 1 in West Berkeley, we already have taken on a lot of the pathway, the Premier Crew, a lot of shelters. We have homeless walking our neighborhoods and our streets. I go to Kenny with my son. There's homeless people around and about, and they are can be abrasive and scaring people. And there's kids here. And I'm wondering what you and the city are going to do about it, because I heard what you just said, and it's really concerning to me. You're saying, well, if 5 members vote for this project, what can you do? Well, you can vote no, because this is your district and you represent us. And I thought this is what democracy in Berkeley is about, but you're saying something that's really frustrating. Like, what are you doing? Well, why did we elect you? And so I'm sorry, but it's very frustrating hearing that kind of language. And I know you care about the community, but the language is such that I think we have to take a stand in some ways. And actually, my view is if we're going to put homeless housing here, we should make sure it succeeds for the long term. So, and thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. I really do. Thank you.
Thank you, Jay. Just Jay, Jay Martin. Well,
John Martin, thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry, John Martin. Thank you for your comments. You raised a number of issues, but let me just say, first you asked, what are we doing about the, I think you were referring to unsheltered homeless people who are walking around our community.
Yes, thank you. Sorry,
yeah.
Thank you.
So I want to be very clear. This is what we are doing. This is the solution. A lot of the best evidence-based research says that we need to have a housing first approach for people who are chronically homeless with serious challenges. And having permanent supportive housing is the solution. So, I want to be
I just want to tell you, yes, that's partly the answer, but it has to be supported with services, mental health, a lot of other things for it to work properly. And that's based on experience I've had in the affordable housing world.
And I want to be clear, that is exactly what this is. This is housing with services and supports, as my initial presentation laid out. And, I want to be honest with you all. There are a lot of people in this community who are supportive of this project, and I am one of them. I think this is something we need to say yes to, and we need to do it in a way that is sensitive to the real concerns and issues that you have. But I support this project, and I am going to vote.
Council member, are those people living near this project that actually support this project? Or
Yes,
are they
yes,
living
they
blocks
are.
away like yourself? I just would like to know.
Yeah, there are people who live very close to this project who support it, but that's I think everybody's opinion matters to me, especially people who are very close to the project. And I want to say that we're putting this meeting together because we were requested to do so from people who live very close to this project. I understand this is a very significant change, and I know that it is hard, but this is the solution to the issues and concerns that people write to me about every single day. Let me just tell you, there has been a chronically homeless individual in our district. He was on the West Street bike path for a time. Then he was arrested. Then he moved south of University Avenue near the Target, near residential areas right there. He was using, people were reporting open drug use, right? Very concerning behaviors happening outside, very close to residences. The reality is somebody like that needs to be inside in housing with services. And the reason why I am supportive of this is because we have had 2 Project Room Key hotels in this city. The Project Room Key model, it's different because it's not permanent supportive housing with the supports, but it is serving the same type of chronically homeless population with serious issues. We've had 2 hotels, and speaking about disproportionately having these services in District 1, both hotels were in District 1. Of course, the neighbors around these projects were very concerned at the outset, but we have had more than 40 people in these hotels for more than a year. And I asked Mr. Budenhagen, have we had any complaints? I have not received a single complaint from anybody who lives around that hotel ever. And I get lots of complaints all the time. I get multiple complaints every single day about that person who is unsheltered across the street from people's homes on Acton and Berkeley Way. I haven't gotten any complaints about the Project Room Key hotel. So that is why I support this, because this is actually going to reduce the number of complaints and concerns that people have about unsheltered homeless. And that is based on on the evidence and the experience that I have had in my 3 years on the council. So I really think that we need to be open-minded to this. I understand that it is difficult, but it is actually going to make things better for our city. And if there are serious problems, I will work with you and we will solve them. But I can tell you the Project Room Key hotels, they have not had any complaints. Mr. Budenhagen, can you confirm that, because I know you looked at the 311 records for those hotels.
Yeah, we look at the 311 records and I get a lot of complaints also. And we had some minimal complaints about trash that may or may not have been associated with the people living there, but no complaints about behaviors or anything like that. So yeah, that is correct.
Okay, thank you for that. And so, I don't know if that's going to give any comfort to anybody, but I need to share, that is what I'm seeing, that when people are inside with services, I don't get complaints from the neighborhood. And when they are outside on a bike path, in a park, on the sidewalk, I get multiple angry complaints. And we try to address those issues. And, there were a lot of comments in the chat about the RVs, and we're trying to address that as well. I know this meeting isn't about RVs. We can have another meeting about that. And I can then update in my newsletter about the RVs, but I know that there is unsheltered homelessness, relatively close to this site. And we're going to make sure that everybody who is chronically homeless in Berkeley is in that coordinated entry system so that they can be considered for this. And, I'm still working with staff to see if we can make a Berkeley preference for this
Can I
site.
say one thing? I can hear what you're saying, but you've said the same thing in the past about RVs and we still see them. So like at some point your words only go so far. And I think that we experience this every day living in this neighborhood. I'm speaking for someone who does live in this neighborhood. And I'm not saying that you're not listening to us, but you've said this about RVs. I've written your office well over a year ago about this. I know a number of people have, and we still see them. We still see the problems associated with them, and they are hard to solve. But the way you're talking is like you're gonna, the minute there's a problem, we're gonna fix it. But I guess you're talking about evidence-based, but the evidence is barely a year old. And I really made the comment about the longer term view. This is permanent. This is a different situation. And I think for all the reasons about the efficacy of this program, the cost associated with it, the site, the neighborhood concerns, it seems like maybe you should at least think about our concerns and actually develop some policies or maybe enforcement, something to actually address some of these current issues we have before you start making promises about future issues. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Well, let me talk about the RVs a little bit because, what I have found when I have interacted with people who are living in RVs and living in cars is that they can't afford the housing in Berkeley because it's so expensive. So again, what we are trying to do here is create some housing that very extremely low income people, only 30% of the area median income, that is the population we're talking about. Folks like that will be able to afford this housing. What we also need to do, and we are trying to do it with our Measure O affordable housing bond, but we need to see other cities do their fair share as well, is create housing that is affordable to people at moderate income levels. Because, some of these folks in RVs, they work, they have jobs, and they have a regular car that they use to go to work, and then they go to their RV at night because they can't afford the housing here. So if we say no to permanent housing that happens to be in our neighborhood, we are going to have more RVs and more people in cars and more unsheltered people. That is the connection here, that we don't have enough housing for people at lower income levels. And so
yeah.
I think I can't say to other constituents, the city is working on long-term solutions like permanent supportive housing, and say that is the solution that we need to pursue, and then tell you all that I'm willing to vote no on this. I have to be internally consistent in what is the right solution for our city. So that is why I'm telling you the hard truth. And honestly, I understand that is upsetting to many of you, but I think that
you were elected by us, though, Rashi. It's not that's the thing here about democracy. That's how it works.
Right. And you are free to not vote for me next time. But this is a fundamental issue here. I knocked on your doors multiple times. I talked to 5,000 people in this. I knocked on 5,000 doors in this district. And most of you told me that homelessness, unsheltered homelessness, was your top concern.
Yes.
And
but
I am
not at $500,000.
Tom, let me finish. I am trying to address the serious concerns I heard when I ran for this office, and I am willing to take the hard votes. And you are welcome to not vote for me next time if you don't agree with this approach. But I'm trying to do what's best for everybody in this community. And I understand that you have serious concerns. I totally think that they are valid. And I want to make sure that you have the assurances that you need. But I cannot vote no for permanent supportive housing for people who do not earn more than 30% of the area median income. That is just not something that I think is right.
Then enforce the
do a
other
time check.
laws
We are
of the
at-
To the
city.
next person who has her hand
Hang
up.
on, we're at 6:44. So I want to thank Mr. Budenhagen and Ms. Ernst for being here, but I want to give them the opportunity to sign off because we've gone well over 1 hour. But you know, they're welcome to stay if they would like. Let me just make the commitment that I want to hear from Amy, David, and Joyce, and we'll try to do it quickly. And then we'll just have to end this meeting at that point. I know there will be more questions, more concerns, and I'm happy to answer those and you know, continue to have this conversation with you. So let me do Amy first.
Hello, my family was redlined into this neighborhood in the 50s, and I still live here, just a couple blocks from San Pablo Avenue. And as a person whose ancestors who have faced generations of racist housing discrimination in this country and in this city, I am passionate that we must not repeat the oppressive structures established in the 19th and 20th century urban planning and development processes. And I find it entirely unacceptable that this Golden Bear Inn project home key conversion is just perpetuating redlining practices. And there is nothing else included in everything you're talking about that makes me feel like you have any commitment to stopping the perpetuation of the inequalities. Like, I would like to see you personally make a commitment to bring it to the city council yourself and say, I am behind this project home key conversion. However, there are so many needs of my constituents and my district that must be met first. In order to approve the project home key project, let's make sure that Berkeley is actually addressing systemic racism, because it's unfair to keep dumping this on my family. And I am tired of being thrown under the bus by a bunch of developers and other parties with financial interest in like completely controlling the decision-making process of urban planning. Like, this is completely unfair. And it's not that I don't want Project Home Key. It sounds fantastic. The thing that we really need is in fact supportive housing. And it's the whole package deal. It's not just like somebody can, you know, park themselves there for the night. It's the whole package deal. It sounds great, but you're still ignoring like major sources of why these people need the help in the first place. Is structural racism. And this is not the way to do it. And like say, well, we'll get around to eventually maybe thinking about making sure that the rich, wealthy neighborhoods finally take their share. We need to make it a part of this deal now. Okay, and this is your job, Rashi. You need to go in there and you need to fight for us. Say, this is a fantastic project. We would love to house more homeless and supportive housing, but we also need all of the other districts to step up. And we need a real commitment, not a performative commitment from the Berkeley City Council to make structural changes to like historical 20th century racist development.
Thank you, Amy. I really appreciate your comments. I know you've sent really important emails raising this issue, and I just want to make it really clear. I think I've said it earlier in this meeting. Yes, absolutely. I want the higher income neighborhoods to have this type of housing as well. And I want those council members to hold meetings like this and give the hard answer that I just gave to John, that I know this is something that you're having serious concerns about. You're asking me to vote no on it, but
I'm not asking you to vote no. I'm asking
no,
you to make a yes vote, a conditional vote.
Right, I know John was, and so this same discussion plays out in every district, right? And so what ends up happening in these higher income neighborhoods is I don't know, I cannot speak for those other council members.
I don't think this happens in other districts, really. I think it happens in District 1 and 2 primarily.
So yes, and that has to do with the zoning and the structural racism of the history of redlining that Amy is talking about. And
great, let's open up parking for people living in their vehicles into districts 5, 6, and 8. It's just parking enforcement, it's not zoning. Let the unhoused living in their vehicles park in districts 5, 6, and 8 and make that a condition for approving this Golden Bear in Project Home Key conversion.
I mean, Amy, those folks who are living in their vehicles are free to park in those areas now. so I don't know how to legislate that, but, I'm happy to talk to you more about a way to do that. I have considered many different proposals related to RVs, including, the possibility that each district would need to make a commitment to host a certain number. We can certainly explore that. I'm happy to talk to you more one-on-one about that. I do want to say
I want to see active policy changes, not, I'm tired of the performative garbage.
Okay, well, thank you, Amy.
Just stop talking about it and make it happen. This is your job. You're being paid for this.
Okay, thank you, Amy. I think just in the interest of time, I'm gonna go, I want to make sure that the final two hands get a chance. So David, are you still here? Do you want to share your comment or question?
Yeah. This was the second comment I had from the beginning before I yielded. This is more just of a procedural optics question because I assume other people have noticed this too, but Ali Kashani, who owns MPI Homes, he's the developer. He's also he's in the middle of a 4-year term on the Berkeley Housing Authority board. He was nominated by the mayor a couple of years ago. And I'm not a politician or versed in city procedures, but I just want to ask the question to make sure this is all above board. Is it a conflict of interest if someone, that's on the Housing Authority board is also the developer for a project that's getting city funding? I assume that there would be no impropriety because that would be crazy, but I wanted to ask the question.
Thank you, David. I will tell you, Berkeley Housing Authority is a separate entity from the city, and nothing about this proposal is related to any of the activities that Berkeley Housing Authority does. And the RFP was issued by the city, and whenever a city RFP is issued, we are required, this is part of an open, fair, and competitive procurement process that all government entities are required to adhere to. We're required to score the application in an unbiased way. In this case, we only got one application, but the reason why it was accepted, I believe, Ms. Ernst can clarify, is because the applicant was qualified and met the requirements stipulated in the RFP.
Okay, just one follow-up. In order to sit on the Berkeley Housing Authority, you need to be nominated by the mayor of the city of Berkeley. How is that in any way visually separate from the city of Berkeley?
So, I will have to look into how that appointment process works, David. I'm not aware of how that works. Okay. But email me and we will look into it. I really want to make sure that we have strong ethics and we make sure that if there are any conflicts of interest that people recuse themselves from decisions. I think in this case, the Berkeley Housing Authority doesn't have anything to do with this RFP, but
okay.
If you're wondering about, the mayor appointing him, we can look into that and we can even get the city attorney's input on, whether there is any conflict of interest there. So feel free to email me on that. And okay. Joyce, please go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Rashi. Yeah, the thing is, I'm really surprised that you haven't been over there to the Golden Bear Motel and you're going to vote on this without having seen it. The thing is, it's a motel and these are rooms. It's not, I wouldn't even call it a studio. I really wouldn't. I've been over there a lot over the years. I love that motel and I've had lots of people stay there, but it's not a home. The idea, there's something that is insulting to humans. I can't explain it, to expect somebody, like I could see if somebody wanted a real program that was going to help homeless people to get back into a home and to rehabilitate and to be back in the community. What I wrote in the chat, I don't think there's anybody in this room. I don't think there's anybody at BACS. I don't think there's anybody on the city council or the city of Berkeley that wants to live in one of those rooms as a permanent house. And why you would think that a home, now I can see, I don't know much about this or the room key, but it sounds like room key was taking people in as a temporary thing and then moving them out to other places. I could see staying in a motel for a short period of time. It's like a glorified prison. It's a room. It's just a room. You know, so it's like the idea of going to all this trouble and saying that this is now, no, I can see, yes, okay, it's better to be in a room than on the street in the rain. Sure, okay. But that's a temporary stopgap. But it's a different thing to expect somebody to live there for 15 years or as a home, like we're living in our homes. So I don't get it. I really don't. And I really think that you and everybody on the council, you know, it's not okay that the council is going to vote on this tomorrow. It's not. It's really not okay. I mean, you're in this room now and you're hearing from us. And we're all speaking sincerely and honestly to you. We're the constituents. We're involved in this. We found out about it last week. It's like, how dare they? How dare they make a vote tomorrow? How dare they? Without giving us, it's so disrespectful. I mean, it negates all the things that you're so kind and you try to say all these wonderful things, but it doesn't seem like anybody really cares about us. Now, we're people too. You know, a lot of us have worked really hard to get to where we are and to live here and to live in our homes, and we're still struggling, right? And to just blatantly drop this on us with a week's notice and then they're voting. I mean, they're not even giving us the opportunity to look at another operation. David tried and he got a no answer. It's unbelievable to me. What does it look like in operation? Have you been to one that's in operation?
Joyce, I actually did get a response. They sent me some pictures of a couple of their other places. They weren't able to set up visits because of HIPAA. Just wanted to clarify that.
Well, it's still not okay. It's still not okay. Somebody should be able to see what that and give us a report as to what happened. What you know, something. This is just not enough time, Rashi. It's not fair. They did the same thing with the workforce housing. They pushed it through because the funding was impending. It almost seems like a gimmick to me. It really does. And it's made me very, you know, I used to love Berkeley and I used to love living in Berkeley. I don't like it so much anymore. And I don't like the city of Berkeley so much anymore. There's a way that they operate that's on a level that is not connected to the people who live here and not real. And this is a perfect example of it. This is something that you don't throw on a community a week before you vote on it. It's not. It's just not, this is not the kind of thing that you do with that. And it's just simply not okay. And for you to tell us that all these council people have already decided that they're going to vote yes, they're voting yes because it looks good. It looks good that the city of Berkeley is doing something about homelessness. And it may ultimately be good that they're doing something about homelessness, but not like this, and not by disrespecting all of us in the way that they're disrespecting us.
Well, Joyce, thank you for your comments. You shared a lot. So let me just say, I don't know how I don't want to give the impression that I know how other council members are going to vote. I do not know. All I can say is that I have heard other council members talk about the need for permanent supportive housing, you know, so much so that some have voted against projects that had market rate units because they wanted to have more affordable units. That's all I can say for sure, that in concept, I have heard many of my colleagues speak in support of this type of project. That's really all I can say for my colleagues. On the issue of, you know, the size of these units, yes, they are very small. And Joyce, I think you noted in your comment, you know, you know, maybe it's too small for somebody who's in a single family home in Berkeley right now to conceive of. But I want you all to remember what it was like when you got onto the freeway and when you got off the freeway at University Avenue just a few months ago and what it looked like. right? We all
But
know what
Rashi,
that looks like.
that doesn't excuse, I can't explain it. It's like, yeah, I mean, that sure, it's better to be in one room at the Golden Bear Motel. For how long? I mean, you're describing this as housing. To
Yes.
me, I mean, it's
So
not.
if
It's
somebody,
not.
so Joyce, if somebody,
If homeless people actually make the effort and they want to improve themselves, this is not ultimately going to be a home for them. It would be very hard to have, there's no, and also it's just for single people. It's just for single people.
well, so
It's
Joyce,
not for
let me just
families,
tell
it's not
you
for couples.
that, you know, we have a long list of people who have been assessed through the coordinated entry system. If people don't want this housing, if it's too small for them, they don't have to take it. If they prefer to live by the freeway, where they are subjected to the elements and the freeway air pollution and the rats, they can, you know, we have people living by the freeway right now. So the people who want this housing, for whom it works, they are the people who will take it. And I don't know if our backs people are still on because we've gone really late. But you know, they may be able to speak to, you know, the frequency or the ability for people, you know, if they're able to get stabilized and get a higher paying job and they no longer want to live here, you know, they are welcome to move on, I would think, although, you know, I would defer to our backs folks to confirm that. But I don't think that they are still here because of the late hour. So you know, but I appreciate your comments and your concern. Looks like Margot is going to sign off. You know, we're at 7 o'clock, so I think I totally understand that there are still a lot of questions and concerns. The public input was too short. You know, I don't know if Mr. Budenhagen, I know Margot's signing off, could speak again to that constrained timeline. You know, the one thing I will say is that if we do not submit this application by January 31st,
Yeah, if you get it tomorrow, that would be perfect.
So if we don't submit this application by January 31st, you know, we are going to not receive as many funds. The way that the state has set this up is that people who submit their applications by January 31st would get more funding than people who submit their application later. So it could create a situation where our local general fund would have to cover more of the costs if we were to delay the action. Paul, do you have anything further about the constrained timeline?
That's correct, what you just said, council member. Also, as Margaret said earlier, the state is approving applications on a rolling basis. So getting the application in earlier, in addition to getting a larger share of state funds, also means that there's a greater chance that they would actually fund it at all. So
why wasn't the
you know, we don't
public
know.
notified earlier of this? Because other cities have gotten applications in well ahead of us. And it seems like it's a rush. And I do sympathize with other people that this is a way the city has cleverly done away with public comment on this. And I'd really like an answer, Paul or council member.
Well, it wasn't done, John, for the purpose that you're saying, to constrain public comment. That I can assure you. The timeline that Margot ran through and that the council member did as well is more what it was, where, you know, the state NOFA and the city RFP and the application by January 30th were all within the frame of November, December, January. So, I mean, we don't control when the state puts out their NOFA and when they set their timeline. So we either respond to that or we could just say no. But
Now,
we
can they approve the funding, but hold off on the site? I mean, can they approve on the funding and have it be open to perhaps find another site?
No, they wouldn't. That would be very unlikely. I mean, there were, oh, Margaret.
Is it possible? Is it possible?
I think that would be really challenging because to submit the application by the end of January, we would have to have identified the site and have authorization to apply for that site.
Well, as you know, the thing is, it's just, I feel like it's too bad. I mean, I don't feel like that it's fair to rush something like this and to dump it on the community without giving us a fair shot at finding, you know, it just doesn't seem right. It's like somebody made a mistake. Somebody made a mistake by not letting us know in enough time. Someone made a mistake. It wasn't our mistake, and we shouldn't have to pay for it.
I will note too, we did a request for an RFQ initially, and that started back in May. The RFQ, which is like a more streamlined process to submit proposals, did receive a couple of responses. All of those responses were invited to respond to the RFP, and we did only get the one response. That was the only sort of project that became viable through that process, unfortunately. So, you know, there are still processes ahead of us, you know, including the application and the application review and approval and some other analysis. And I do want to say, I really appreciate the thoughtful discussion that you've all had here today. I really do understand the concerns, especially for those of you.
Is that RFP available for the public to review?
Sure, yeah, we do. I'd be happy
Can you
to
post
provide
it?
that to you.
No, I'd like it posted for publicly, if possible.
It was posted. I doubt that it's still posted.
It's not there. It's not
yeah,
posted.
I can, you know, it sounds like, you know, the RFP is posted during the period that is available for people to respond, and then it comes down. But there may be
I'm
a
talking
public
about the
record
response.
still.
The developer's response.
Okay. Is that
I'd like to know what makes it qualified.
Okay, Margot, is that something that can be shared, the RFP response?
I believe so, but I'll need to confirm that. I'm going to put my email into the chat, and the gentleman who asked that question can reach out to me directly.
Thank you.
Thank you, Margot. I think that would be great to have that document. And, you know, if we're going to provide that, it might also be helpful to provide the RFP that the city put out.
Also, does that RFP have the criteria that was matched and the scoring and how it was scored? I've done this a few times. I'd like to just make sure the city's followed the procedure.
I'm gonna fair to say yes, although I did just start working for the city in November, which was after the RFP. So
So are you telling me yes or no? Because it sounds like you're equivocating here.
No, I genuinely don't know. I'll need to get back to you on that.
So it just seems like the process hasn't been transparent enough, and no fault to you, Margot, and you, since you're new. And council member, I don't think this is about you personally, but there is a process that there's something that doesn't seem right here. And I have gone through these processes before, and it's simply, we're seeing $16 million available, and we're trying to get that money. And democracy, Berkeley, the community can really take a back seat on this. And I just want to make sure we follow the procedure, because we only got one response, which concerns me, because a lot of cities got at least 3 or 4. I've worked for a number of cities. And so if we only got one, that means there was a problem here, or there's something that's not right, or this wasn't desirable enough. They probably did the numbers. And so it would be really nice just to see what the developer's response was and how the city scored it to make it qualified, fall into the qualified applicant. Because if not, it should have been that this process should have been reopened and gone through another RFP process. And cities have done that if they haven't gotten the right, solicited the right responses. So I think it's fair, you know, because some of us in the public do know a lot about these things, and we'd like to know. So I appreciate you being able to post it. And I would like to just maybe say, why couldn't this vote just be postponed a week or two till the public actually has a chance to look through everything? It's not clear to me, and I'm sort of following up on a couple other people's comments. And I also want to thank you all for your time, because we have gone over, so thank you.
Yes, yeah, so, you know, I'm gonna just say at the outset, I'm going to respond to what John just said, and then we are going to end the meeting because we've gone way over. But I just want to acknowledge everybody's comments, questions, and concerns, and we will keep talking to you. So I think, Margot, it will be great if you can share both the RFP and the response. And then the question of postponing this decision for tomorrow, I'm pulling up right now the council's meeting schedule because this was a special meeting that was scheduled later to accommodate this vote. And it's the final meeting of the year. And the next meeting of the year would be in late January. I don't actually have the 2022 meeting agenda in front of me. And obviously I can't single-handedly say that this can be postponed till January, because remember that the January 31st date is the date that we need to submit this by to be most competitive for the most amount of state funding. But I will certainly make a commitment to ask Paul about that, about whether this can come to the council at the first meeting in January. It's okay. My aide Beth is telling me it would be January 18th. I don't know, Paul, if you're able to answer that now, or if you need to look at, what the state requirements are first.
Well, it's not the state requirements. It's that it's already what we already talked about, which is the deadline for us to submit it to the state by January 31st. Now, when my conversation with staff prior to this, they felt like the December 14th would be the latest that they could get the response back from council and then turn around the application and submit it to the state. So Margot and I could check with staff to see, like, okay, if you get that, if you receive that response January 18th, would that give you enough time between the 18th and the 31st to send it? That I don't know, but I from previous conversations, the answer to that was no.
Okay. Well, thank you, Paul, for that. We are 40 minutes over our end time of 6:30. Thank you to our city staff. Thank you to everyone who attended, who shared, and please know that you can always email me and we can set up, a call or an in-person meeting, and it can be one-on-one. You don't have to have a big group. All of you are my constituents and your perspectives all matter to me. And I want to make sure that we address your issues and concerns. And so thank you, everyone, again, and have a wonderful evening.